Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
Hello and welcome to another week of 1111 Talk Radio. Today is sure to be an insightful and hopefully inspiring conversation. I want to start off because I think that most of us throughout our lives, the great issue that we deal with ends up being separation. It's the separation of our internal and our external, of our minds and our hearts, of the things we want and the things that we long for, of the things that we've experienced and the desire to push those away. And ultimately, if by grace and by meeting the appropriate people and finding the right information, we finally discover that we are the universe, then all of a sudden there's an opportunity to empower ourselves in a different way, to reside within our bodies and have a sense of agency over ourselves and our lives, to begin to create them. And so when we talk about that idea in spirituality or personal growth about creating our reality, what does that really mean? Is it the lofty pursuit of the law of attraction or the secret? Is it a real focused intent to go out and grab what we want? What does it mean to really create the life of our dreams? And do we even know if that's something material or if that's deeper, more of a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment? Jim Carrey said that your job is not to figure out how it's going to happen for you, but to open the door in your head. And when the door opens in real life, just walk through it. And don't worry if you miss your cue, because there's always doors opening. They keep opening. There is so much confusion about manifestation in popular culture. And Dr. James Doty says that manifesting is to define an intention such that it gets embedded into your subconscious, the part of the brain that functions below the level of consciousness. By doing so, it activates those parts of your brain that make an intention important, salient, or noteworthy to the brain, the areas associated with goal orientation. This means that regardless of whether that intention is present on a conscious level, brain mechanisms that remain focused on one's goals are activated around the clock. Our inner intention then guides our lives. By using that inner power to tap into the vast resources of our own brain, we gradually cease reacting to our external environment and begin living from our deepest intentions. But what does that mean when life blows up? And we've all probably had that experience where all of a sudden life doesn't look quite like we intended it to look. My guest today is Dr. James R. Doty, and he's a Stanford University neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, compassion researcher, New York Times bestselling author, former chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation, and founder of Happy AI, an avatar companion for mental well-being. In addition to his medical expertise, Dr. Doty has lived experiences of using manifestation to revamp his reality. After he went from rags to riches, back to rags, Dr. Doty overhauled his thinking to focus on being spiritually and morally centered. In turn, the riches stayed for the long haul. And he has shared this in 2 books. His first one, Into the Magic Shop, relays quite a bit of his story. And the one that we're speaking about today is Mind Magic, the neuroscience of manifestation and how it changes everything, where he outlines the 6 steps to support you in achieving the mind state, the heart state, and the meaningful states that you are looking for. Welcome, Dr. Doty, to 1111 Talk Radio. It is a joy to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
This is really powerful. As I read your story, I was brought back to places in my own life where all of a sudden it was like everything had been done right, and yet this big explosion happens. And I knew inherently that there was a golden nugget that was hidden in the darkness that I was yet to discover, something that I had completely missed. And you opened this book talking a little bit about not relying so much on perhaps the ideas of the secret or some of the new age concepts or thinking that there is a universe or something out there that is going to bring everything to us. And for some people, that might be a little off-putting if that's where they really came from. And yet, as you go through the course of the book, in a way, paradoxically, you also say that all of this magic does still exist. And so I'd love for you to start off by helping us understand how what you're talking about really is a daily practice of well-being and how it is connected to the universe and yet not connected to the universe.
No, that's a great question. And I think this can be confusing for many people. One of the challenges for many of us is to actually have insight and self-awareness, or a term that sometimes is used as metacognition. And what I mean by that is being able to look at ourselves objectively and to understand, as an example, the drivers of our behavior and even our belief systems, or if you will, how we create limited beliefs. And part of this relates to giving our own agency away. And what so many people forget is that the greatest power each of us has is our ability, if you will, to create and control our reality based on our minds. And while this may seem crazy to some people, this is actually based on a deep understanding of neuroscience, and it is not something that comes outside of ourselves. Thus, this idea that the universe or some external being, agent, God, etc., has, number one, an interest in us at all. Number two, that somehow if we worship the universe or this external thing, that somehow if we're quote unquote good, we're going to be rewarded. And the reality is that this is not the case at all. I was having a conversation with the actor John Hamm, who actually I know, but is a friend and also has read Mind Magic. And he said, at best, the universe is indifferent. And I think that's really true. And what we forget is it is us who creates our reality. It is us who creates our limiting beliefs. So the truth is that, one, we must claim our self-agency, or if you will, our sovereignty. And by doing so, we can actually embed our intention or goals into our subconscious to activate various cognitive brain networks, which actually then activate these systems within us to achieve our goals. And this may seem strange, it may seem weird, but this is reality. And this is the antithesis, if you will, of the secret from a variety of perspectives. One is this is not about wishing for a Ferrari to show up in your garage or manifesting wealth, because sadly, these are narratives that have been created that define success, unfortunately, in our Western culture. But what happens is these come out of a feeling of insecurity or fear, or this desire to get external affirmation. And this will never make you happy, at least in the sense of long-term or deep happiness. It must come from a different place, a place of generosity, of thoughtfulness, of kindness, of caring. And that's not only when your brain and physiology work their best, but it is when your cognitive brain networks function to allow you the greatest possibility of you actually manifesting your dreams.
I really appreciate the beginning of the book and this explanation. I'm very aligned to the idea of the universe being neutral, if not indifferent, because I do believe that whatever we do, the universe doesn't really look at good, bad, right, wrong, success, failure, any of those concepts that we as humans can judge. And in a way, this also helps to point a finger back to ourselves to see where we're bypassing. And what we're bypassing most is a level of personal responsibility and what you call that sacred agency throughout the book. You say that manifestation is about cultivating a fierce belief in possibility. And that seems like another step once we've decided to take responsibility that we are the ones that have to look at ourselves or make the time, the effort, the energy in place to proceed forward. Can you talk about that bridge between taking responsibility and then moving toward a fierce belief in possibility?
Yes, it's interesting because many people, if not most, have this belief that there is some external power that is controlling their destiny, if you will. Now, don't get me wrong, there are external events that certainly can influence our lives. But what happens to many people is they believe that they have no power over their lives. And one of the most important things is actually realizing that all of us are, if you will, manifesting. But for most of us, we don't understand, if you will, how to use our brains to manifest. And this is the process of embedding, if you will, our goals or our intentions into our subconscious. But one of the things that often prevents us is that we don't appreciate what has already been embedded through our background, if you will, or our history as children in the context of embedding habits or responses or behaviors that are based on our development as children. And as a result, individuals will make repeated decisions, whether in regard to choices such as partners or jobs or how they interact with another, and they have no self-awareness that almost every decision they're making is based on, for some, childhood trauma. And this is why you see people who will say, I don't understand. I'm going through my third divorce, and I look back and it's like I married the same person. And it's not a healthy relationship. And this is oftentimes due to the trauma and the baggage that we carry from our childhood. So one of the most important things is to understand what you're already manifesting. And this may, in fact, require therapy or spending time, perhaps journaling, reflecting on the events that occurred in your life that have made you who you are to this point. The other problem for so many people is that they give their agency away. As an example, I mentioned doing actions for external affirmation because they believe that if others will accept them and think that they're important or they've accomplished something, that will fill this empty void within so many. And unfortunately, this is the narrative that The Secret and other books propose. And and going with that narrative, unfortunately, is also that if it didn't work, you were at fault. And that's not the case at all. you shouldn't blame yourself because somehow you were not able to, quote unquote, communicate with the universe. So the reality is that many of us, especially in Western culture, have a negative dialogue that says we're not good enough, we're not worthy, we don't deserve, it is not possible. And once you tell yourself this over and over again, this becomes truth. And thereby you have created a prison for yourself. And each time you tell yourself these negative thoughts, it's as if you're laying a brick into the wall of a prison that you're creating for yourself. Yet the reality is that you always have the ability to open the prison door. Many people don't appreciate that.
We are always manifesting, and this is something that I write about in my latest trilogy of Living, Being, and Knowing. And within that, I came also to some of those same realizations, because the book Living is about identity, and it is the identity that is formed out of that childhood wounded self and the desire to overcompensate. And being is that part of us that is the shadow animal nature, or the wounded part that is still holding on to all of those pieces. And knowing is the part of us that has to get back to compassion and kindness and love and the true virtues and essence of us. What I came to was that all three of these aspects always exist. We're just not always present to them. And that's why we have these alternative blessings like divorces and bankruptcies and breakdowns and all of these things that eventually can show up, because we have started to push one of ourselves into the background that we didn't maintain the love and compassion for, and we also didn't maintain the practice of the direction that we really wanted, that was a deeper level of our humanity. You talk a lot about, in the book, the story of coming back to that child, where you wrote out a list of what you wanted to achieve, and you came upon the realization, a person can't possess more than they can love, and I had not opened my heart any wider than when I first wrote my list. That was such a profound statement after reading your story, because I don't know that individuals realize how the heart becomes closed. So this is as much about neuroscience and the way the brain works and the way we can focus, as well as it is about the heart, correct? And that's one of the elements that I always found missing in The Secret. They didn't bring the emotion and the backstory into it. So can you talk about the bridge between the mind and the heart when it comes to manifestation and mind magic?
Absolutely. And thank you for writing that book and summarizing it, because, in fact, I think that is a wonderful explanation for this, even this conversation. What happens for so many of us, and I think I would use the terms a fear narrative versus a love narrative. And what I mean by that is, as you know, of course, we have a autonomic nervous system, which connects to our brainstem and is distributed throughout all the organs in our body, especially in the heart itself. And it's a two-way street. So there's actually ongoing communication. But one part of the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic nervous system, or what many call the flight, fight, or fear response, or could be flight, fight, fear, freeze response. But regardless, this is the system that's activated when we are fearful or scared or feel we are in danger. And while if we look back at our evolution as a species, this was critically important in hostile environments, but it rarely occurred. Most of our time was spent engaged in activation of our parasympathetic nervous system, or what's commonly called the rest and digest system. But this is the system that doesn't look through the lens of fear or threat. It looks through the lens of connection, caring, being present, being generous, being thoughtful. And as a result, if you will, this is a love narrative. You're connected to others. You recognize your purpose. because from an evolutionary perspective, our offspring don't run off into the forest or the jungle. We must care for them well beyond a decade, and that requires time and resources. But why would you do that? Why would you care? Why would you be present? And the reason is because we have a genetic imperative to care. When we care, certain neurotransmitters, such as oxytocin, are released, and these stimulate our pleasure and reward centers. When we care, we feel good. Plus, the other interesting thing compared to the sympathetic nervous system is that our brain or cognitive brain networks function at their best, as does our physiology. And in fact, when you engage your parasympathetic nervous system, you even increase your longevity. Conversely, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated through fear or anxiety, this actually shuts down certain cognitive brain networks, and in fact, they do not work as efficiently. Now, in regard to manifestation, this does not necessarily result in you not being able to manifest, but it certainly has a negative effect on those possibilities. And this is why when people chase after the Western definition of success, equaling happiness, this always relates to money, power, position. And people chase this, and this is fundamentally hedonic happiness. And the problem with it is people define themselves by their things, or how wealthy they are, or their position. And then they hold this up to the world for them to be admired or to get external affirmation. And such quote unquote happiness or chasing pleasure and avoiding pain results in a very transitory and shallow level of happiness. Versus if you engage your parasympathetic nervous system, this actually results in not only your cognitive brain networks and your physiology function at their best, but this is the greatest place to manifest from. Your brain networks are functioning at their best. You're not afraid. And your actions are not related to seeking external affirmation. They're related to meaning and purpose. And as a result, this eudaimonic happiness is actually quite deep and long-lasting. And this is how you should be this should be the place where you actually manifest from, because you're relaxed. You're looking through a lens of we, not versus I. And this is how we evolved as a species, to care for the other.
I really appreciate how you break down the science of the brain and what really happens with us, alongside taking individuals through these different steps to, I would say, most importantly, get into their bodies. We live in a world where it seems like everyone is kind of hyper alert. And with the things that have happened since 2020, things that constantly happen in the world, election cycles that come through, the fears we have around, global and climate crisis, all of these things kind of keep us in that state of hypervigilance and probably an undercurrent of that fight or flight and fear response constantly going. And so for people that have experienced trauma, for people that are finding that they're really in that place in their bodies, but wanting to run from their bodies, do you have a suggestion other than first becoming aware of what's going on in the brain and doing the exercises, but to really bring a person to the place that they don't fear the fear?
Well, that's a great point. And it's interesting you say fear the fear. Oftentimes, the fear of an event is worse than the event itself. And on some level, this requires, if you will, this idea of emotion regulation, being able to sort of understand what it is that is causing your stress and anxiety, because only then can you address the issue. So I think that's very, very important. And part of it relates to this fear versus love narrative. How do you shift from your fear narrative to engage your love narrative? And one of the fastest ways to do that is through a mindfulness or brain training practice that allows you to connect deep within yourself and to be present. Because when people are in the fear mode, if you will, oftentimes this leads to their inability actually to think clearly, and it limits their abilities to actually manifest. So being able to be present, being able to connect with others, that is fundamentally our baseline state. And one of the quickest ways to get there is through mindfulness types of practices, which, as you point out, I outline in the book. And for many people, these can be quite powerful in determining how they think about themselves and how they proceed forward.
In the prior book, Into the Magic Shop, Dr. James Doty shared his own personal journey of manifesting himself out of poverty into wealth, out of it again, and finally back to the heart of compassion at the center of what a woman named Ruth taught him. It was a person's story with its highs and lows, advantages and setbacks. This book, Mind Magic, is about his journey where he shows you how to harness, it's about your journey, where he shows you how to harness your brain's power to make your intention reality and explain exactly how it works from the perspective of neuroscience. He guides you through 6 steps to manifest intentions to become reality, informed by a lifelong practice of studying the mind as a neuroscientist and as a meditation practitioner. You can find out more about Dr. Doty's work by going to any of these 3 websites: jamesrdoty.md.com, his app website, happy.ai, and ccare.stanford.edu. That's ccare.stanford.edu. We'll be right back with more of Mind Magic, the neuroscience of manifestation, and how it changes everything after these messages.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Do you want more? More joy, more abundance, more power and presence? How would it feel to have more loving relationships, more empowered community, greater fulfillment, and life purpose? The 1111 Mastermind community inspires, empowers, guides, and supports transformation. Shift your mind, expand your heart, deepen insights, let go and chart a new course, dream a new dream. The 1111 Mastermind community is an online portal for personal transformation and soulful expansion. Go to courses.1111mag.com. That's courses.1111mag.com. Change begins with you. Let it be simple, convenient, and transformative. The time is now. Step through the 1111 gateway. Courses.1111mag.com.
Have you seen 1111? Do you wonder why certain numbers keep showing up in your life? 11, 111, 22, 33, 444. People all over the world are seeing 1111 and learning the language of universal communication. Subscribe to 1111 Magazine today. www.1111mag.com. 1111 Magazine is a bi-monthly print publication that offers a rich, multi-sensory experience. As you engage with experts and topics of consciousness, become enlightened, empowered, and energized, so you live a passionate and authentic life of conscious choices. 1111 Magazine, a daily staple for lifting the mindset, discovering the heart, and stepping into conscious living. 1111 Magazine. Order now at www.1111mag.com. 1111mag.com.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
Before we get back to Dr. Doty's wonderful book, Mind Magic, I just want to mention that if you are someone that avoids your shadow or has difficulty integrating that part of you, I highly recommend my latest Oracle trilogy as a place to start. These are not a set of books that you're going to read from beginning to end. In fact, they are designed to bring you more present. My recommendation is that you open each one and read just a couple of lines, maybe one paragraph. And that's all the books will let you read, because they are designed to bring you to presence to the parts of you that you cannot see. So get your copies of Living, Being, and Knowing and begin that journey today. The typical American spends about 1,460 hours per year on their smartphone, which translates to about 91 waking days per year just spent on the phone. Our devices are designed to exploit a psychological phenomenon known as a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. As we incessantly check our messages or hunt through content for one piece of information that will make us okay, or become increasingly flooded with horror and empathy fatigue as we doom scroll down the suffering of the world, we helplessly watch our attention slip away from us. We lose the power to direct our attention. We can sink into despair and feel we do not have influence over the course or quality of our lives. Our inner power rests in our ability to make conscious decisions about our investment. If we cannot direct our attention as we choose, it is as if we're giving away the capital we possess to change our circumstances. We are giving away our self-agency. This is from Dr. James Doty's book, Mind Magic, The Neuroscience of Manifestation and How It Changes Everything. He has another book as well, if you want to get that one also, called Into the Magic Shop. And you can find out more about him at 3 different websites, which are in the bio description of his on the show page. And they are jamesrdotymd.com, happy, HAPPI.ai, and ccare.stanford.edu. Welcome back, Dr. Doty. I want to talk a little bit more about the lack of presence. We do have a lot of technology that seems to take that away, and that does impact other parts of our brain. It impacts our ability to escape. It does something in terms of the incessant chatter that also kind of stays in place, or the shadow consciousness that we tend to live by without notice. Can you talk a little bit about how we can work with that subconscious to teach it what is more important, as well as even our conscious states, because we are really hypnotized by so much of what scrolls on our feeds these days?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't appreciate is that based on our evolution as a species, in ancient times, the sympathetic nervous system was critically important for our survival. And it responds to threat or fear. And unfortunately, in modern society, this has been exploited.
The human nervous system evolved further with the addition of the parasympathetic nervous system, or PNS, also known as the rest and digest response, whose job it is to return the body to the peaceful resting state known as homeostasis. We are here to switch to that rest and digest, and Dr. Doty is going to share more of how that process unfolds.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that.
That's all right.
But you're absolutely correct. I mean, in ancient times, our sympathetic nervous system was critically important because potentially threat was everywhere. But that being said, it was still not always present. In modern society, frankly, and unfortunately, by the nature of capitalism, our media companies and social media companies have exploited this weakness because we don't turn to good things happening. We turn to potential threat. And as a result, the goal of many companies is to keep us stressed and anxious and fearful to get eyeballs. And as a result, many of us end up, as you mentioned, doom scrolling or always being activated because of something that activates our sympathetic nervous system. And when this happens, of course, you cannot be present. You are focused on this one thing. Yet, what we know from neuroscience and actually the study of our evolution as a species is that for us to connect with others, it requires us to be present. Because when we're present, we actually are able to shift into this parasympathetic nervous system. We're able to look through the lens of connection, kindness, generosity, openness. And if the media is constantly trying to shut that off, then it separates us. The other thing that happens, and studies have shown that the majority of the time, we are either thinking about what could have been, might have been, should have been, or we're thinking about a future which has not yet occurred. And also, as a result, this further distracts us from being present. So one of the keys is, what is the best way to become present? And the reality, again, relates to training our mind. And this is to quiet our mind, to be able to emotionally regulate. And this can be done actually fairly easily through mindfulness type of training. Now, the problem for many people is, though, the very nature of talking about mindfulness or meditation creates some degree of anxiety because people perceive it as you have to sit with your legs crossed and sit up straight. And it often seems impossible because many people are either uncomfortable or doing this type of practice makes them fall asleep. But the reality is that is not the only way to do it. A walk in nature can do it where there's quietness, where you're not distracted. Simply sitting and again, removing all the distracting things, your cell phone, the television, the radio, and just sitting and breathing slowly in and out. The very nature of that should not be stressful, but it does activate your parasympathetic nervous system. And that brings you to the present moment. And it's actually quite amazing because once you're able to do that, then you're able to listen, you're able to process. And connecting with another, oftentimes the most important thing is to be present and to listen to them. And this actually creates this calming effect because you're not feeling as if you have to respond or you have to do something.
The book very beautifully takes individuals through these mindfulness processes after educating on the brain or on manifestation. And then at the end of the book, you actually lay out the entire 6-week process. So if someone really wants to focus in and support themselves in making these changes, they truly can. What you also talk about in the book are about the 4 neurotransmitters that are responsible for our sense of happiness and well-being, which are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins, and how we feel better with these, how these chemicals play an essential role in the experiences of our positive emotions and help us to teach or reteach our brains to classify our intentions as important and worth pursuing. Now, as I say this, the majority of people that we have in the world are always wanting that quick fix. They want it to happen instantly. They want to read the book and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be able to manifest. Or if I just go take a walk and, have an intention today, then I'm going to start to see my result tomorrow. And that's part of how we bamboozle ourselves and also avoid that, I think, responsibility and presence that you're speaking of, that agency. Can you talk a little bit about falling victim to the quick pill and really giving oneself the time and the presence and why we would do so?
No, I think that's an excellent point. Unfortunately, part of how our society has evolved is this feeling that we should be able to immediately command what we want. And, excuse me, this is not how manifestation works. And what I mean by that is, like so many things, this is the nature of habit. And it's important to create habits because that allows you to change your brain. And what I mean by that is, as an example, if you want to run a marathon or become an elite athlete, you don't wake up the next morning and say, okay, I'm an elite athlete, and you run 26 miles. It's a process, and it takes work. Manifestation is not, I want it now. Manifestation is a process of training your brain to not chase a dopamine fix, if you will, but to be patient, to be present, and start with small habit changes. And there are a number of books about this. B.J. Fogg or James Clear have written books about habit change. You can't expect change to occur that second. So you have to be patient. And as a result, when you're patient, you get used to something. And this is really what's critically important. As you slowly create these habits, they become familiar with you. And the more they become familiar, as a result, this then creates or strengthens these neural pathways. So it's from habit, it's from repetition. And the interesting thing about repetition, and this is one of the tenets, actually, that is commonly mentioned in many of the narratives about manifestation, and it's true, is that by writing down your goals or intentions, by utilizing your sensory organs, and what I mean by that is you have a vision or an intention, you write it down. You're using your hands, if you will. You read it silently. You read it aloud. You close your eyes and you visualize yourself having manifested that intention. Each of these actions, each of these repetitions create and strengthen neural pathways that then significantly increase the likelihood of your intention manifesting. And the reason this occurs is that this then allows for the embedded intention into your subconscious through a process that is called value tagging.
You share in the book that some evidence of the dysfunction that we experience is because the salience network is featuring the anxiety, the depression, the pain. It brings us back and wrenches away our conscious direction by these compulsive thoughts. And so if we enter into a practice of repeating the rituals or visualizations or any type of repetition where we're constantly putting that new intention, that new thought back into our focus and presence, then all of a sudden we are able to maybe not neutralize the others, but our focus and attention goes in a different direction. Is that what you mean by the value tagging? We start to move in a different direction of what we look at.
Yes, what we do is, because many of the things that activate the salience network actually are oftentimes negative and they limit us. When you, with intention, embed, if you will, positive statements or positive desires. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between saying, I want a Ferrari, because the reason you want a Ferrari is external affirmation, versus saying, I want to, as an example, open a restaurant so I can give the gift to people of my experience of giving them nourishing food, versus saying, I want to open a restaurant so I can make as much money as possible. They're completely different narratives, and one is much more likely to activate your salience network. And once you activate the salience network, then this activates your attention network in the context of searching for situations and always being attuned via your subconscious to events that might positively impact what it is you're trying to manifest. And once your subconscious recognizes this, then this brings it to conscious awareness, activating your executive control network. Now, prior to activating the salience network, if you will, what happens when we value tag, it actually activates our default mode network, which is self-referential and is associated with mind wandering or daydreaming, which is not necessarily task positive. And what I mean by that, though, is it allows you to create a narrative about yourself. And once that narrative is defined, then that activates what we call our task positive networks, which is the salience network, the attention network, the executive control networks. And this then allows for you to manifest your intention. But what I would caution is actually, though, one, being attached to an outcome or a time frame, because oftentimes things, one, may not manifest exactly as you wished, or two, they may not manifest in the time frame you wish, but that doesn't mean the process failed. And in fact, sometimes they don't manifest at all, or it's not the right time. And sometimes your subconscious has much more self-awareness than you do at a conscious level. And there are reasons why things might not manifest. One of the challenges, though, is to accept this reality and not be so focused on an outcome. Because if you're so focused on an outcome, as an example, let's say there's some sort of athletic competition, and you're absolutely determined, if you will, to win the race, and you spend all of this time practicing, trying to get there to win the race, well, you may have sacrificed so much, and you do win the race, but what is it that you sacrificed to win the race? And I think having some insight or self-awareness about what it is you're trying to manifest is also important, because to stand at the top of a mountain and say, I won, and of course, this also relates to seeking external affirmation. If you've sacrificed being present, if you've sacrificed important relationships to get there, what is it that you've actually won?
It sounds like a statement that I came to very early in my own spiritual journey, and that was, you are not on a journey, you are the journey. And I think so often people, when they have that outward goal or that outward thing that they want, the Ferrari, the restaurant to make a lot of money, to be the winner of a competition, that is being on a journey where that's still out of reach and out there. But if it's more about what you can experience within yourself growing as well as serving in the restaurant, or within yourself growing as well as expanding your strength within training for the competition, all of a sudden you become that journey, and that creates a lot more fulfillment and satisfaction, which ultimately I think is what really brings meaning to life. And you write, I see manifesting at its heart a practice of well-being, engagement with the world, and a living of a good life. By practicing it, we cultivate dispositional optimism, defined as a generalized tendency to expect good outcomes across important life domains. So when we're living more from the inside as opposed to what we're reaching for on the outside, do we cultivate more dispositional optimism? And how is that supportive to us individually and then to us collectively through the service that we can bring?
Well, I think this concept of dispositional optimism is really, really important because in some ways it's emotion regulation. When you get so fixated on a time frame or a goal, this actually can be a detriment to your ability to manifest. Or it can actually be a detriment in terms of actually being present and finding meaning. And so I think it's really critical that we understand this reality about being present, if you will.
And when we come towards understanding that we can rewire our brains and create greater neuroplasticity of positive outcomes and manifestations, where does vibration fit into all this? How does the heart then support in that significant vibration of the human body?
Well, the reality is, and unfortunately, this concept of vibration or oscillation has been utilized by individuals who promote the woo-woo or the pseudoscience of manifestation or other New Age thoughts, because on some level, it's true that all living beings emit vibration. In the context of humans, as an example, we do emit vibration primarily from our heart energy. And what's fascinating about that is that this energy can emanate 3 to 5 feet beyond our bodies. And as a species, we actually are attuned to these types of vibrational energies. And it's interesting because I'm sure you've experienced our ability to intuit another's emotional state. As an example, your partner, if they walk into the room, oftentimes you can tell immediately their mental state or how they are feeling, their emotional state, and they don't have to say a word. And this is why I'm sure you've met people who you meet and immediately you either have a negative response or a positive response because how they carry themselves, there's an energy that emanates from them. And I think that this actually, not understanding this actually in some ways diminishes our ability to be present, because when you're present, you're attuned to these types of vibration or energy. As an example, there's something called heart rate variability. Now, many people confuse this with how fast your heart is beating, but that's not the case. When you have engaged your parasympathetic nervous system, or this rest and digest mode, which activates our cognitive brain networks and improves our physiology to allow them to function at their best, this actually is when you have an increase in heart rate variability. And what this means is that between beats of your heart, the heart rate is variable. It may, let's say, if you're looking at somebody who has a heart rate of 60, their interbeat variability may vary between 0.8 and 1.2 beats per second, while somebody who is incredibly anxious, stressed, or who've activated their sympathetic nervous system actually has a decrease in heart rate variability. As an example, their
Dr. Doty, I'm sorry we have run out of time, and there's so much valuable knowledge that you have to share that I'm going to invite everyone to get your book. Where Dr. James Doty had once made a list of material goals, he has a new list, which he calls the alphabet of the heart. 10 things that open the heart: compassion, dignity, equanimity, forgiveness, gratitude, humility, integrity, justice, kindness, and love. Manifesting does not just magically happen overnight. It does not go from 0 to 100 in a microsecond. It is not a passive endeavor. Manifesting is a practice of engagement and, more importantly, understanding the process of placing one's intention into the subconscious, which takes many rounds of repetition. And as with any practice, it is wise to start with a small, manageable goal that is not too far out of reach. Manifesting is not a one-off practice. It is not a magic wand, and it does not allow us to leap over the laws of physics or the natural stages of human development. There is no ceiling to what you can pursue, but even your wildest dreams can only be realized one step at a time. At the same time, release expectations and open to magic. Get your copy of Mind Magic, The Neuroscience of Manifestation and How It Changes Everything by Dr. James Doty. You can go to jamesrdoty.md.com, happy.ai, ccare.stanford.edu, and join me next week for another great show. Thank you, Dr. Doty, for being on 1111 Talk Radio. I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living here on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Remember, you are not on the journey. You are the journey.